This agenda up to the magic moment of 3 o'clock, at which point ideally we would like to go into public excluded after a short coffee break and deal with those two items. A number of these items in discussing with the staff we're going to propose treating as read, and if having read them, folks have issues with the direction of travel in them, raise your hand, speak up, and we'll flag it, and we'll have to deal with it. If it can be accepted as read, then then that would be better. So the first thing we're going to deal with is Flaxmere Solar Farm, which is a decision item, and
I've got to find them.
are we not going to deal with that?
Making arrangements for him to be first.
Should go under
Excuse me, Rex. Graham Duncan's okay for 3 tomorrow.
Okay, good.
The Chairman, would you like me to go on to the
Well,
CME report?
yeah, let's do item number 9. National Compliance Monitoring.
Onward.
Is.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the committee. This is an item for your information, and it's presenting a report that was commissioned by the regional sector to look at compliance monitoring and enforcement reporting across New Zealand. The main reason for it was there was an identification that there are differences in the way councils report and in fact differences in how they undertake their CME functions. So this is the first attempt at bringing together a report that would then could now be used as a benchmark for future updates. So what I've done in this paper is attached the concise summary of the report. I've identified or sort of highlighted, I guess, both the national statistics and the local ones, and then I've just really summed it and prepared discussion around some of the key findings of the report, and those come under our actual reporting, the identification of our level of resourcing, the decision making and where that sits in terms of prosecutions for which sit with the Chief Executive, and then a couple of other matters. So given the time constraints, Mr. Chair, I'm happy just to take questions rather than go through that.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Under resourcing number 13,
Yes.
the report has found that HBRC has some of the lowest staffing levels per head of population.
Yes.
How relevant is that when you consider that 120-odd thousand live in two big centres? I mean, and most of the work's done outside the 50k zone. So.
Yeah, it's again, the purpose of this report really was to establish a benchmark for the whole of New Zealand, and so to that extent it's relevant. I guess the other question is the quality of the work that's done, etc. But it is a comparator, and it gives us some sort of sense of I guess prioritising by a particular council for this function, but shouldn't be read as the exclusive conclusion to that.
Seemed irrelevant.
Chair, could I just add on that the anecdotal evidence we have of the councils that have much larger teams is that it's driven by dairy effluent management consent requirements. So obviously in the likes of the Waikato and Taranaki, etc., you've got much more consented activity, and then also on top of that, where you've got bigger manufacturing and industrial centres, and you can think about obviously Auckland, and again the Waikato, for example, where you've got a lot of point source discharges either to air or to water that also require consent. So the nature of the Hawke's Bay economy is material in terms of thinking about the level of resourcing required.
Councillor Barker, and then.
Well, I'm happy to move the report, the recommendation, but I also have another recommendation.
No apologies.
I'm jumping that.
That's clear.
I just thought we want to get on.
No,
Well, I'll park up.
You have a question?
It's to the chief executive, really, and it's a little bit loaded, but this catalyst group are a little bit conflicted when they come to us and I think that it reflects in this, perhaps, not accusing them, but my question is, do you think they're conflicted given that they're on the other side of the water conservation order? And given, I don't want to read too much into understanding our nation's stewardship of the environment, nothing about Tangata Whenua's stewardship, the nation's stewardship, which sort of fits into the water conservation argument as well. Do you think they're conflicted?
Procuring the services of Dr. Marie Brown was a fairly conscious decision by the regional sector to have somebody who is noted for their long-standing concerns and criticisms around performance of all agencies involved with environmental management. And actually, Dr. Brown did her PhD on this topic when she was working for the Environmental Defence Society. So I think it's a case of us having procured a known critic to do the work, so there could be no suggestion that the Regional Council had done a patsy job in terms of evaluating its own compliance. And so we did get probably one of our biggest critics to run the ruler over ourselves.
Further question?
Thank you, Chair. This is to James and probably follows on from, I can't remember whose question it was, regarding resource, Fenton's question regarding resourcing, but the number of resource consents that are like to be required down in Central Hawke's Bay and in Wheretonga under both Plan Change 6 and Tank, I assume there'll be a view to increasing resourcing in the next long-term plan round?
Yeah, so the current long-term plan had an increase in the current financial year, and there's a further increase in the next financial year in resourcing for the compliance team, and that was with a view to managing the pressures arising from Plan Change 6 around consents there, and also the NES on plantation forestry. I think it's fair to say that we are still working through what that ultimate resource burden is going to look like, and in all probability we will be coming back in the next long-term plan with a view for needing some more staff in this area. There are a bunch of regulations currently being developed by central government around at-risk, high-risk farming activities, feedlots, winter cropping, cultivation on the slope, a range of things like that, plus mandatory stock exclusion for the whole country, which would include obviously every farm in New Zealand. When we see those, and they're likely to be promulgated, I guess, early next year, we'll have a better sense of the job that we've got to do. But I think it's inevitable that our compliance team will continue to grow to ensure that those regulations are fulfilled. And I guess the other area in forestry, while we've increased our capacity, we've got a sense that we're probably going to need more than we had expected in terms of people on the ground to ensure compliance with the National Environmental Standard. So look, this is just going to be a growth area. I guess the good news for the ratepayer to some extent is that the policy changes made in the long-term plan increase the level of cost recovery here to 80%. And so it will be the exacerbators that pay the majority of that increased resource burden.
Yep, that's cool.
I've just got a question regarding taking enforcement action. So the sector nationally successfully prosecuted 216 and achieved 216 convictions, of which we had 4.
Correct.
Now, I could draw a conclusion about our willingness to take enforcement action, or there might be some particular circumstances that cause other regional councils to be more litigious or need to be more litigious. I'm interested in why we're so low.
I actually struggle to answer that because for me this is the first time I was aware about how high it is nationally. So I think that it's a very good discussion to have with my colleagues when next time I meet with them. I mean, we, in terms of our processes, you know, we obviously go through due investigation and assessment of where our enforcement action should sit, whether it should be an infringement, abatement notice, or the prosecution. And so I'm satisfied that we're not being lenient on anybody, if you like, but I would like to know, why there is such a difference, and perhaps, was there a particular focus in one region of New Zealand, that had a particular issue.
Yeah, because I know the agony you go through making decisions about taking that step.
Yeah, look, I understand that the largest single proportion of that 216 relates to dairy farming operations. So again, the likes of Southland, Canterbury, Otago, Taranaki, Waikato, you would expect there to be a significant, because you've got a consent, you've got conditions you've got to meet, and therefore you've got a reasonably straightforward set of issues to take to a court. Pastoral farming generally in Hawke's Bay outside of feedlots and dairy operations is a permitted activity, so it doesn't come under a compliance regime, and they're not rules that we're necessarily needing to hold people to account for. So again,
I think we probably need a bit more information to understand these numbers, so I'm quite interested to see that.
Yep.
Councillor Barker, we moving on.
Just a question to the Chief Executive. Do you think, in the light of this report, it would be useful for the council to have a report on an overhaul of the council's compliance monitoring and enforcement procedures to ensure that we have a comprehensive framework for data capture, that we have appropriate processes for benchmarking, the appropriate processes for establishing best practice, and processes to respond to the notes of concern in the report about Hawke's Bay?
So we did review our compliance function 2 years ago, and we had an independent consultant come and do that, and that did lead to some of the resourcing increases in the long-term plan. In terms of the data piece, so the new IT system that we've been introducing for consents and compliance is now live, and that will be giving us much better data and, to report in this area. So I think in terms of the recommendation from Dr. Brown on that, we've largely fulfilled that. I have been talking to Mrs. Lambert recently about us having a deep dive into our forestry compliance activity and getting a sense of the extent to which we're fulfilling the National Environmental Standard on plantation forestry. So there's a very specific thing to look at there. We're also currently recruiting for a new compliance manager, and my expectation is that a new appointee will want to take a reasonably fresh look at our practices. But I also note that the compliance policy itself, compliance and enforcement policy, was before council in the last 12 months, and there has been there were some changes made to that, and that has been signed off. So if I look at all the pieces of the puzzle, it's not as if they are archaic and haven't had attention recently, but I think the appointment of a new manager in this area does provide an opportunity just to take a fresh look and make sure that we're doing all of this as well as we can.
And we did adopt don't we have a semi-annual report?
Yes, you got an annual report
already on this.
Yep.
And that
Are we not?
and that report will be coming to the next ENS, will it?
Well, it'll be, the next available
August.
One post 1 July.
Yep.
Councillor Curtin.
Well, Mr. Chair, there's one thing to report, another thing to change the model and the way we're heading. My concern about this report, I am going to put a black hat on because this is a significant report. Information management, particularly regarding the outcomes of incident responses, demonstrates room for improvement. Well, when I was at school and I used to get room for improvement,
6 canes.
it usually meant I went to the headmaster's office and got it.
How often did that happen?
Quite often, actually.
Twice a week.
There was lots of room for improvement.
Still say it.
And they still say it. My point is this. We've had in the last 3 or 4 years, this council's presided over some of the most significant consenting disasters that this country's experienced. Havelock North being one, most significant, but we've also had Central Hawke's Bay wastewater, of which we're reaping the benefits at the moment, Wairoa, Napier City Council, Tuai. So just putting the other hat on and saying, have we got it right? It's all very well, I mean, resourcing's one thing, we go from 10 to 12, But is that the answer? And I'm interested to know, and I've pursued this for some time, is the overall engagement on our consents, particularly our large consents, the overall engagement, top to bottom, what are we doing about that? And my own view is that that's where the real benefits are to be had, is that discussion. The discussion we had this morning with Central Hawke's Bay is much more productive than simply looking at compliance and how many poor people out there did we prosecute. That's, to me, is not the point. And I want clarity around what are we doing that's majorly different than what we did before at strategic level to manage this.
Well, I think certainly around Three Waters, the level of engagement, the strategic dialogue with the territorial authorities about their asset management plans is in light years away from where it was pre-Havelock North. So we now have continuous engagement and good visibility of those assets and where they're heading in terms of their ongoing improvement, and this morning was a case in point in that. Our compliance monitoring over Three Waters has now got a dedicated focus that it didn't have prior to the Havelock North incident, and we have dedicated staff to overseeing the compliance of those assets. Personally, I'm satisfied that we are looking at those highest risk consents and compliance with them, and have dialogue with those consent holders that's at a level which is appropriate. And will also ensure that we can have confidence in continuous improvement. And it was mentioned to me yesterday that Queenstown Lakes, I think, has had over 200 wastewater discharges into Lake Wakatipu in the last year alone from issues within their wastewater network. And I just remind Council that we have provided data which has shown that the incidents which have happened in Napier City, notwithstanding them not being acceptable ultimately from an environmental or community point of view, are common around New Zealand. So I don't entirely agree with the assertion that this Council has presided over some of the biggest shortcomings or failings in compliance monitoring around resource consents this country's seen. Havelock North was a particular incident, and we absolutely own that. But of course, there were many contributing factors to that, and I don't think that incident can be sheeted home to the compliance and monitoring of this organisation alone.
Can I follow up with that as well? I mean, I have to say that I do agree with your assessment that we could do better, but I always think we could do better, no matter what area that we're working in. And all I can perhaps reassure you is saying that certainly in the last 12 months, because that's been the only time I've been having more hands-on involvement with the team, there's been a strong commitment to working at engaging, rather than working with, actually engaging with those TAs in particular, all 4 of them, and we do have dedicated officers to do that, and that is paying off in terms of, and I'll give you one example, that one of our officers is now on the invitation list to the regular internal meetings that Napier City have about their stormwater. It's an internal staff meeting. He gets invited to all of them. So, that kind of building of that relationship and that level of engagement is starting to pay dividends.
Councillor Bailey?
I'm ready to second if Councillor Barker wishes to
I'm happy to move. How's
Second.
that for collusion?
Any further discussion?
Well, yes, Mr Chair, I do want to comment, and thank you for the staff for doing that. The point I have made, continue to make, will continue to raise, is that as governors, we need line of sight on those very important strategic discussions that are taking place, and this morning's example was a case in point. There is a role, I know this is contentious amongst staff, but there is a role for governors around the table when it comes to that strategic discussion, and I'm not resiling from that. We can help, and we ought to help in that engagement with our colleagues and the other TAs, and I just think we need to make a fundamental shift. I appreciate it's bound away, but we need to double and double again our efforts to ensure that we can do our job.
Thank you, Councillor. More comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I appreciate Liz's comments that this is only a snapshot, so that's fine. It'll be interesting to see if we get another one of this reports done in the future to see if there's any trends available. But I'd just like to comment on paragraph 8, with respect to James's role in the decision-making process, and just to say that I appreciate his independence. I certainly would like to see him come under any political pressure to make a decision one way or the other.
Graham?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm happy to receive and note this report. But I do want to state for the record that I'm not happy we're dealing with these catalyst people. They are on the, and this report indicates their prejudices. I think they're on the wrong, they are compliant with supporting the supporters of the Water Conservation Order, which doesn't take into any recognition of Tana Te Whenua's rights to tikanga, and I just don't think we should be doing any business with these people.
Councillor, you can wrap it up as the mover.
Well, I thought I'd have my first speech, and I can do that with the second one.
Would you like one or not?
Don't have any speech. I'll just say, firstly, I'd like to thank Liz and that for the work you've done on this report. The first thing that come out of this is we seem to have a pretty hodgepodge CME scheme across the country of regional politics. That's the first thing that comes, and that's why I suggested we have to look at benchmarking and best practice. But the chief executive has gone past that by saying, well, we've got a new person coming, they'd like to have a look at it and do that and let them have a look at it, and we've got all the elements there. So I defer to that, but I put him on notice that at some stage in the future, when the new person's appointed, I'll want them to come back and have a look at this report and see where we sit in relation to others to make sure we have got best practice, that we have got stats and recordings which will measure up with anybody else comes to have a look at it, and we've got the balance about right things. So I think that's a thing we would do. And the other thing I was just intrigued in here, and when we do that, I was intrigued to read about the chief executive's involvement, that some people saw this as a reputational risk, is what's written here. I don't want to go over this today, but when the new person comes in, I would like to go back and examine that issue. Is this in fact correct or not? Personally, I've felt comfortable with the chief executives involved in ultimate decision making, and it's not delegated. That's how I felt about it, and I felt that if we delegate it, that involves us to more risk. So I want to have the discussion about this with the new person that come on. Then the last comment I'd make, Chair, I just want to say to all of you cynics around the council who from time to time give me a hard time about my West Coast history, I want to draw your attention to page 7 of the report, managing workload. Councils detect varying levels of compliance with their regulated communities, ranging from only 22.1% considered to be full compliant in Auckland through to 96.3% on the West Coast. The West Coasters are the most law-abiding and compliant people.
First time anyone said that.
That's an ambitious comment.
So I will put the motion, which is to receive and note on page 41, receive and note the National Compliance Monitoring Enforcement Report. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passed. Right, now we'll go back to item 8, Flaxmere Solar Farm. We've had the gentleman patiently waiting to discuss and understanding that issue.
Our nation's
So Mark, would you introduce your guests?
Chairman.
I'd like to introduce Chris Lambourne, who is the project manager for Power to the People in putting this proposal together, and a representative from St Andrew's Church, who's been doing a lot of the formative work in putting a proposal up. The reason for the report, I'll just take you very quickly through a couple of salient points. First is that the item provides the Environment and Services Committee with an option to consider partial funding of a solar farm that could supply 400 homes in Flaxmere to reduce energy costs utilising the HeatSmart Sustainable Homes programme. HPRC is asked to consider a proposal to provide borrowing towards a total capital project of 2.7 million to build and operate a 1 megawatt photovoltaic solar farm on a 2-hectare site. The proceeds from the sale of the electricity generated are to reduce the cost of retail power to 400 low-income homes in Flaxmere and Camberley. Power to the People is a social enterprise developed through St Andrew's Church in Hastings and aims to improve the lives of approximately 1,500 people in those 400 low-income Flaxmere and Camberley homes. It will do this by reducing the electricity costs and promoting the use of electricity to heat homes during the winter. Central to the viability of the Power to the People project is to have very low-cost capital, where 2.2 million of the capital comes through grants and only $500,000 comes by way of debt. We have looked at how funding has been provided in the past through the HeatSmart programme and more recently through the Sustainable Homes programme. And I'd remind you that the two areas where these 400 homes sit are within the airsheds and therefore would qualify on an individual property basis for the subsidised HeatSmart loan. This, however, takes us in a slightly different direction in proposing that we support a commercial enterprise rather than supporting individual home owners. Solar will assist the Regional Council moving from the national current renewable energy level of 85% to the planned 100% in line with Council's strategic goal of carbon neutrality by 2040. So this is an opportunity, bluntly, to put our money where our mouth is. HPRC could choose to offer a discounted rate under the HeatSmart programme, and there is another paper coming to your attention regarding the interest rate that is currently charged on the voluntary targeted rate scheme. We have managed to acquire funding now through the local government funding authority at a very competitive rate, currently 2.9%. The charge for the Sustainable Homes programme is currently 6%. I think there is good reason to move to reduce the interest rate on the Sustainable Homes loans and therefore the Clean Heat loans, which will also act as an incentive for take-up. A little bit outside the tenure of this presentation. What I'm asking for is an agreement in principle and subject to acceptance by the Regional Council of a full business case and debt security being procured to extend lending to Power to the People to achieve the objectives of the HeatSmart and Sustainable programmes. Now, with this paper was also an appendix, which unfortunately wasn't included, and that is an excerpt from the feasibility study that has been carried out by Power to the People. I'm quite happy to circulate that information to all councillors prior to any further discussion at the council meeting on the 26th. In the interim, I'm sure Chris would be delighted to answer any difficult questions. That he may have access to the knowledge that I don't in terms of returns, etc.
Chris, do you want to add anything, or do you want to go to questions? Or
I think I'd like to have an opportunity to. I think I'd like to have the opportunity to have a quick discussion, in that we have Barry, who has some experience, which I'd like to advise you of.
Kia ora ana tātou katoa. My name is Barry Rangi. I am the Cook Island Secretary for St Andrew's Church in Hastings. My background is in teaching and implementing health in Hawke's Bay. I am here to support the proposal before you, which seeks to open up the Regional Council's Sustainable Home Programme from only being individual ratepayers to also include entities like Power to the People. Power to the People is a social enterprise project that has been created by St Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Hastings that aims to increase the heating in the homes of about 1,500 people living in Flaxmere. Our goal is primarily to make homes warmer and secondly, to control electricity pricing. We started this project because of the life experiences heard coming from Flaxmere and Camberley. Sarah is on a health benefit. She has had chronic fatigue syndrome since 1984. She turned her hot water off to save money. That was in 1987. Since then, she has washed herself using a bowl of hot water. It is now 32 years later. Well, I can't imagine washing myself in a bowl of hot water for 32 years. Other stories started coming out of the woodwork. Stories of pensioners sitting around home in sleeping bags, afraid to turn on heaters, afraid of not being able to pay the power bill. Stories of families sleeping in the one room to get the temperature up. These are people whom we see. These are whānau for whom we need to do better for. Power to the People is a long-term commitment. We're planning to have this program going for 30 years. We don't know exactly how this will improve people's lives, but New Zealand research shows that the social benefits of Healthy Homes program can deliver up to 360% return if homes get warmer. We're establishing a partnership with the Eastern Institute of Technology to provide a long-term monitoring and evaluation framework that focuses on identifying the social benefits achieved. Thank you.
It's Councillor Bailey, then Councillor Dick, and then Councillor Grant.
Yep, thank you, Chair. To Mark, have we received any similar sort of proposals from any other organisations?
No.
No.
Councillor Dick.
What is the estimated cost saving, say on a monthly basis, of this service?
The power savings would be approximately 20 to 25% off the existing prices. One of the things that we're really keen on doing is not so much giving price savings, that's one of the impacts. One of the key things we're trying to do is actually increase the heat in people's homes. That's where the health benefits are. That's where the social benefits are. Relieving some of the pressures around the daily budget, the monthly budget, falls in secondary to that.
How will you reticulate the electricity?
That comes through the Unison network. The solar farm gets injected into the local grid and trickles around the countryside.
Sorry, two more. Is it only Presbyterians that will benefit from this?
We do conversions. But no, it's not. It's aimed at people who are who have health issues, people who are in social need, who are receiving social benefits. This is aimed at Flaxmere. Flaxmere has about 45% of the homes there are rented, and this is one of the problems with your existing policy. The existing policy aims at owner-occupied houses, and so you immediately exclude the 45% of the population who are who would most benefit from getting access to cheap finance to improve the quality of their living.
And finally, what will you need to stop this enterprise being sold to a power company?
This is going to be set up as a charitable company underneath the charitable trust. The sale of charitable companies has to be through to another charitable institution. That's part of the legislative framework.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
I guess my question is a follow-up. I think this is really a marvellous initiative from the Presbyterians. My mum and dad would be really proud of you. But I want to make sure that it works. So I'm really focused on who the governors are. So give me some names of some people who will be making sure this works.
Right.
And the governance structure.
Okay, so the governance structure, there will be a charitable trust, and that is populated by local people, and it's also nominees have to go through the Presbyterian Council, which is a New Zealand-wide operation. So that just provides some sort of probity over the types of people that get put on. They will appoint directors to the company, the charitable company, and we're looking for people there who have good experience in this area. Right now, I'm working with Tony Gray from the Hawke's Bay, from the Hastings District Council. Tony is ex-CFO at Mighty River.
Yeah, I know Tony.
Okay, cool. And also CFO at the council. And is also on Eastland Group board up in Auckland. Also had the likes of John Nichols, who's on the Central Hawke's Bay Power Company board there. He's chair there. We've had people like this involved in the structure of it. We also had academics like Dr. Christine Woods from Auckland Business School involved. She's a professor in small, medium enterprise business up there. So we're trying to attract calibre people to the board. We've yet to populate it, but that's the sort of style we're looking for.
Mr. Moe.
Just on behalf of the Anglicans. In the 80s, I had my grandparents living in Hastings, and I told them that I would pay the power bill. And I went around there one night, and they were sitting in the dark. And I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "We're trying to save you money." I said, "Well, that's defeating the object or the purpose." So I'd just like to pull you up, Mark, too. You didn't introduce the other half of the guests in your introduction. And because we have to ask the question, so do you realise that this is a very important take?
Indeed, and it's something which we treat with great care. We are looking to have the opportunity to develop this as a relationship model, not a transactional model, and so that we'll be engaging fully with the people who are essentially our customers. And that's also, it's a long-term program. It's a 30-year program which speaks to the life of the assets. And so it's not just flipping in and out. And whilst recognising that price of electricity is always escalating, goes up on an average of about 2.5% per annum above the rate of inflation. And that's historical. The Productivity Commission came out last year and said that they anticipate that pattern to continue through to at least 2050. And so that would effectively double the prices beyond what they are currently. So we're trying to manage the power cost, and we're trying to encourage people to use it to not defeat the purpose, but to produce a better standard of living, better quality of life.
Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to the recommendations, agrees in principle, subject to acceptance by the Regional Council. That comes back to the full council, Chief Executive?
Yes.
Or the full business case. I think this is a great initiative, and I'd like to see the full business case.
I'm another Presbyterian.
Yeah. Our company.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I'd just like to add that you were talking about the opportunities the council has in the climate emergency space. This is a program, this is a piece of infrastructure which would displace about 2,000 tonnes of CO2 per annum. And unfortunately it falls outside of the carbon credit schemes. But were it to, it would be a really useful package and the type of operation of offsetting carbon.
Are we ready for someone to move
Have questions?
Questions?
Yeah, just actually, just two questions. Firstly, the houses involved, will there be a parallel insulation of those houses? You talked about the total package, if you like, of keeping a house warm. Will you insist that those houses supplied electricity are in fact insulated?
You touch on a really good point there. The first step towards this is going through the conservation and efficiency streams where you do such things as insulation, and Healthy Whare group, which works in Flaxmere, are one of the people whom we're partnering with to do that beforehand. Now we don't have the ability to fund insulation to houses, but there's government requirements to meet minimum standards, and we'll be certainly pushing that in the situations where it comes up.
And the second question was, is the scheme scalable so that if we wanted to double production, is it possible to do that with the scope of the scheme?
Yeah, this is very much a pilot program, and we are anticipating being able to scale it. The piece of land which we're looking at, we are in discussions with the Hastings District Council about accessing Roy's Hill. It's the Captain Close landfill that they have. So we've been talking with their planning and reserves people, and also with the planning people from the regional council about accessing that. So it's going well, and it adds extra engineering costs for achieving it, but I think that's the sort of space which allows us to grow the solar farm from its current 1 megawatt to a larger installation.
Councillor Bailey?
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Seconding? Would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite happy to agree in principle to the scheme. I think it does wonders for our producing our own energy here in Hawke's Bay, which I think is no bad thing. It does help at our goal to become carbon neutral. But in terms of, I would need to see the business case. I need to know what debt security we're actually looking at using before I can agree to it in total. But yeah, absolutely agree to it in principle.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely like to see this go further. Really keen to see the business case and the feasibility stuff. I'm not entirely convinced that Unison won't get right behind this anyway, considering the Commerce Commission is currently going through a pricing restructure throughout New Zealand, and the underlying message is we want you to deliver more for less, basically. So, obviously, as electricity is reintroduced into the grid, it'll be at a really discounted price because Unison will take its line charges out of that, and in fact it won't be a lot of money potentially. So I'm really keen to see what that looks like, and I would the two names you've just said that were involved are pretty grunty, so I'd have no qualms about them pulling this off if it gets that far. So I'm looking forward to seeing the business go.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a comment. I think this is just really marvellous. This is about walking the talk, and it's got two really good hits. It's got global warming advantages, and it's got the advantage of helping a community where some of the people are really struggling, and I'm very aware of that. So I'm really pleased with this. And as far as to say that, 3% interest rate, Councillor Bailey is an ex-banker, so he's always looking for security and keeps me in line on that, but quite frankly, it's not a factor for me, security. What is a factor for me is that we have really good governance, really good people that are going to make this work, and I'd be happy if we didn't charge any interest on this loan. That'd be my view, because I think this is walking the talk, and it's doing something that we can all be really proud of when it works.
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, I actually concur with Councillor Graham on this. I'm not so concerned about the interest rate, but I wonder whether we could see melded into the business plan an approach around the insulation and how that might be included as part of this. I'm really struggling to see that we'd power up a house and then not have that when the opportunity is available through our own scheme. So that would be my advice to see that would be a supporting factor for the business case.
If I could just respond to that, Councillor Curtin. ECA do have their Warm Kiwi programme running now. It will be effective from July of this year. Insulation is a prerequisite, and we are dealing with landlords, and their standards will include build code insulation. So it will be included.
So the houses...
It necessarily needs to be a conditional in the business case for the solar.
So the houses that we're talking about here will be insulated, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Through the landlords.
See, okay.
If there are no other comments, I'll put the motion.
Yeah, I'll just, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see that it seems to be getting majority support, but I would also welcome any other organisations in the community to be prepared to take advantage of the strength of the council's balance sheet, because essentially that's what we're doing here. Because it's not only just in Flaxmere, of course, we have disadvantaged communities. We have them also in Napier and Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay, so it'll be great to help out as many people as we can.
Any other comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Passed. Thank you.
Thank you for adjusting your schedule.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to item 10, update on farm environment management plans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm inviting Shane Gilmer, who's the Farm Environment Management Plan Project Coordinator for Council, up to the table. We just felt that it was, we were forever last year and the year before throwing numbers at you in terms of the number of FEMPs that had been received by us, and once we hit the deadline, we kind of went very quiet on it, so we thought it was a good opportunity to just give you an update on where we're at with the farm environment management plans, and obviously the process going forward from that around the Tukituk catchment, and the requirement now for a number of property owners to have to get production land use consents from us. So Shane has got a very brief presentation. If I go escape. I did.
It's not me getting stuck into those pension bankers about treating...
Is it on the screen already? Look, I'll carry on talking while he's getting that done. You know, a key deadline for the landowners in the Tukituk catchment is going to be the 1st of June next year, when we have 3 sub-catchments where the DIN level is being exceeded, and so they will be required to get resource consents. We're looking at approximately 340 properties, and so that's a significant ramp up in terms of our processing of those consents, because they're all new ones, not replacements.
Some questions, Chair?
Is it already on the screen?
You got the wrong drive.
It's not there.
Was up there earlier on the screen, or just on the on that? There it is. Cool.
Okay. So I'll just give you a quick presentation of the FEMP Hawke's Bay current state, what's our plan, and where are we heading to with the future. So very quickly, farm plan is very simply 3 key things. It's the identification of environmental risk on the property, it's the mitigation of that risk, and then it's your action plan to achieve the mitigation. So very quickly, where have we come from in 2015 with the Tuki plan change being operative? The first farm plans were received to Regional Council in 2016, so now we're sitting at just over 1,000 farm plans. And going into next year's deadline for 2020 for stock exclusion, and also for the over-allocated farms, we're looking at around 340 consents to come in, and I'll show you more about that with a map shortly. The work the farm plans are now going into is a 3-tiered approach with the surface water quality and groundwater. So that's around catchment accounting for subcatchments and establishing subcatchment loads. So that work will be completed by the end of the calendar year to inform the consent application and conditions. And what's coming up next is auditing, and I'll touch on that at the end of the preso. So current state of play, we've done just over 1,000 for Tuki, like I say, and that's split between 800 farms greater than 10 hectares and around 206 farms that are in the low intensity space. So that's both by size and also intensity of the farm system. So there's around 3,300 to go in Hawke's Bay, and that's land calculated with land greater than 10 hectares. So this map here shows you the compliance with the rule. That's Tuki on the left-hand side there, obviously May last year. And really, the majority of those farm plans come in just in or around the deadline. And that deadline was 31st of May 18, and that also is the same deadline, 31st of May for next year for the consent to be granted. Right, on this map here, what I'm showing on this map is those orange polygons. They are the individual farm properties that are over their individual LUC. So that's both looking at the farm NLOS against the LUC framework, the table. And I've also highlighted there the 3 subcatchments that are currently over their DIN level. So those 3 subcatchments plus those individuals tallies up to around 340 consents.
Is that the entire catchment?
Yep. 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 So you're looking at the Papanui, Maunganuku, and the Kahakuri there.
It's worth just I think reinforcing the point that the properties that are exceeding in the bottom and the southern end of the catchment, those subcatchments are not as subcatchments in the exceeding category simply because we haven't got the 5-year averages in, but we expect that when the 5-year average comes in, probably next year or the year after, that they'll all trigger as well. So we'll end up with most of the catchment exceeding. And so I think we're probably tracking towards somewhere between 700 and 800 properties will end up on resource consent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. You can see that large cluster down there around the Tukipo catchment. That'll be the first catchment next in line to pop its DIN exceedance. And so just in regard to those catchments and subcatchments there, the majority of the subcatchments which originate off the plains, that's the subcatchments that are over their DIN level, and the ones that are connected to the main range, obviously associated with rainfall that's collected in the Ruahine Ranges, has a high rate of dilution, so those ones have a lower in-stream nutrient concentration by default there. And I know I've broken a few rules here with the cluster on here, but this snapshot, if I can draw your attention to the upper side of the line, and this snapshot is part of a whole 10-year snapshot for farm planning for the Regional Council. And really, the top just talks to the Tuki timeline, and what we're focusing on immediately is the auditing, and we've established an audit pilot project, which just gives us confidence around the different farm systems that we have in Hawke's Bay, and running those farm systems through the audit templates to give us confidence that we have a fit-for-purpose audit process. What's coming up very quickly, obviously, is the 2020 deadline, both for stock exclusion and also compliance with the LUC. And also, that's going to really inform the compliance team and their work stream going ahead. And then the next thing for me to have regard to is the 2021 review cycle. So under the catchment plan for Tuki, farm plans are on a 3-year review cycle, so therefore need to be resubmitted to the Regional Council. And so lots of work for me in that space around data management, how we collate and manage the information coming in. Then to the bottom side of the line, the tank timeline.
Sorry, can I just go back to the resubmission of the farm plans after 3 years? Do they have to go through the same process, go and get consultants and write their plan, spend a lot of money, or is it a much more simple process second time around?
Yeah, it's a lot more simple. So, for example, if you're a farmer who hadn't actually changed your farm system at all, we'd prepare a template that would go into a portal online, which would enable you yourself to actually fill that out. And there'd just be key information that we'd want to know around, your FEMP and your timeline and your mitigation and task lists like that. Also, a bit more detail around your farm management and how you're tracking towards your end management and things like that. So there'll be a little bit more work, similar to what we're probably going to do with the tank in regard to the annual reporting requirement for farm plans. So the tank timeline there, obviously there's an 18-month timer for catchment collectives that starts at notification. There's slight differences with the red, green and orange zones. So the key thing for tank is that they've set in stone the deadline for 2023 for stock exclusion. So I think majority of farmers would probably end up doing their farm plan to demonstrate their stock exclusion, which coincides hopefully the operative date next year, which then coincides the 3-year, which is the red zone farmers around the 2023 deadline. But I guess just the key differences there I've highlighted on the bottom is the annual requirement for farmers to report back to us on their mitigation and what tasks they're doing, both obviously collectively and or as an individual. And what's coming up? I touched on data management and system design, and that's also inclusive of the integration of farm planning with the consents team, with the consent conditions, and how we monitor that with the compliance monitoring. So it's integrating all those key functions from an organisation perspective. Obviously integrating whatever I'm doing with that template space and also with the auditing as well. So the auditing that we're designing at the moment and trialling will be an audit process that is flexible to coincide any other future plan changes. So it's farm planning across the board. A lot of time spent in stakeholder engagement, obviously with industry, internal stakeholders and farmers themselves. And the key thing I'll be focusing on really is project management. It's joining the dots really. It's making sure we're all doing things efficiently and effectively and keeping all the teams within the organisation up to speed. And that's really my quick overview. Welcome any questions.
Thank you. Can I just finish off by saying, so I'm just following on from Shane's comments about the project management. So we do have a staff project team that's particularly focused at the moment around getting the consent application forms prepared, getting some kind of draft, some guidance notes for applicants, because we're aware that there's only 12 months now until people have to have or 340 of them have to have their consents in place. So time is of the essence for them, and we are beginning a series of stakeholder or engagement meetings in those subcatchments and through July and August, the exceeding subcatchments through July and August, and we want to go prepared with as much information as we can. So we've got the information for them. We've got Andy Hicks and his team doing work around nutrient allocation, so that the inevitable question about how will I know what share I'll have to of nutrients I'll have to reduce. So that kind of information is critical as well. So there's quite a big team working on all of this, and we're really ramping up to meet the market, as it were. Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Just, thank you, Chair. Just following on from our discussion this morning, James, how is this team tying in with what's going on in the water use space, like through the Tuki stakeholders group? Because we seem to be having conversations in 2 different places with people and socialising these issues. That's my first question.
Okay, so I'll answer that by saying that while there's an awareness of what's going on elsewhere, this particular group is very focused around meeting the information demands and requirements of our consent applicants, and very much around a regulatory driver. So quite focused around this new suite of land use consents that people are going to have to apply for.
Okay. How often then are the integrated catchment management team updated on what's
They're part of the group. They're part of the group.
Part of that group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My second question for you, James, is were there any FEMPs that are still outstanding, and if so, are we taking action against them?
So I think there are a couple according to the map up there, and I haven't had any update in terms of whether we've got to the end of the line in terms of discussion. So I don't know if there's anything you can add.
No, okay, no, well, there are still a handful are outstanding, and we're aware of exactly where they are, and we're still working with the landowners on that, but we haven't taken enforcement action against them yet, to the extent that all the ones that we know of are making progress.
I mean, this, I find that frustrating because we have had deadlines and deadlines and deadlines.
We're 12 months past, aren't we?
And we're 12 months past, and 2 years down the track, they're going to be into another cycle. So
4 prosecutions, 20 more.
yeah, I find that frustrating, James.
Yep. Right. So we get feedback from members of the community like Peter Kay, who will say that most of us are doing the right thing, and we all know there's a guy down the road and nothing's being done. It erodes our whole process here to form catchment groups, and we have a whole mechanism we're setting up where catchment groups are supposed to be the ruling. It's going to be the modus operandi here. So when do we slap somebody?
When they don't have a resource consent and they're required to. So that'll be beginning early next year.
I mean, it's been, surely they had a requirement, sorry Liz, they had a requirement to have a fen pin.
Yeah.
And so that's an instruction under Plan Change 6. So are you telling me that requirement is unenforceable? Then if no one had put a fen pin, we couldn't have done anything about it?
Yeah, no, it is enforceable. We can take either issue them with an abatement notice or an infringement notice.
Is it a matter of public record if someone were to make an Information Act request who is not compliant with that requirement?
I don't know, probably. I don't know. I'd have to find out. If someone makes a request, we can look into it.
I hope someone's listening.
Because these people need to be named, straight out. They're giving us the middle finger and it's just not good enough.
Mr. Compliance, what do you think of that?
Oh, I'm pretty laissez-faire on that sort of thing, Mr. Chairman.
That's
completely unhelpful.
Are there any other questions or?
Well, just on that one, I'll give council a view on what we're doing on that council meeting next week.
Okay.
Thank you, James.
Somebody like to move?
Yes, move.
Moved by Councillor Bevan, second. I'll second from the chair. Would you like to comment?
No, because I'm in the interest of time, I'll say nothing. Thank you.
I will pass as well. Any other comments? With the motion, all those in favor of receiving the report?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right. Now we're going to skip a bit here.
Go to number 15.
We're going to go to 15, yes.
So we'll get the 3 catchment managers to come and join us at the table. Again, in the interest of brevity, I'm going to go straight to the point. They've got a presentation they're about to load up and run through for you. I will note that we failed abysmally in the no more than 2 pages for a report category. We're in fact going for the award to exceed that by a long shot. However, the reason this is a big report is there has been a lot of activity over the last 12 months in the space. It's a new bit of work, and so we felt it was important that you had a very comprehensive view of what's been going on. So I'll hand over to the team. They'll run through the presentation, then we'll take your questions.
Okay, so here's a fairly quick summary of the report. So you'll see in there the maps which have the zones and the areas that we're working in, with the middle zone being the largest. You will have seen this map plenty of times before, so this is the SEDNet map of the areas that have the most erodible land that we're using as initial guidance of where to target the work first, who are the most important people to go and visit. So just as an overview that we're going to cover, and you will have read in the report, We've had new teams, new locations and new roles for people. We've had to set up new systems and tools for recording and enabling us to report on the activity. And within the report there are outputs for the year. A summary of some of those key things. We've got 64 approved erosion control scheme applications and 6 almost there. We've got 1.45 million committed to works, compared with a budget of 1.5 million in that first year, so pretty close to what was budgeted. All of the poles this year, the poplar and willow poles, have been sold within Hawke's Bay, and we could have sold more if the nursery had grown more. So there's certainly been a ramp up in demand compared with last year when we sold 9,000 outside of the region. And some assumptions, we'd expect that would protect 560 hectares of land. We also have doubled the riparian plants that we ordered through the riparian plant scheme, and they're going out currently. We applied to central government, to the Hill Country Erosion Fund, and were successful there in getting $5 million of funding for additional work over the next 4 years to boost the work that we're able to do through the erosion control scheme. So some key points from the report. Through this year, as we've been developing things and doing the work, we've learnt some stuff. So we have found that an erosion control plan takes somewhere between 32 and 80 hours of staff time from the first contact to getting them to an application. And so we've used some of these assumptions in planning the work for the year ahead. We have obtained that $5 million through the Hill Country Erosion Fund for more staff and more budget over the next 4 years for on-ground works. But a point to note in that is that as we use our existing funding to leverage more and we lock into deliverables with outside agencies, it does lock us in to work or commit us for the next 4 years. So it reduces in some way any flexibility that we might have to change plans in the future. So when we get to year 4 of that project, we've got 6 staff that are locked into erosion control work. And developing the work that we've got to do, we've had to do quite a lot of recruitment over the last year, and we'll continue to do that, which will also involve training and upskilling staff. There are competing demands on time with policy implementation to come and other on-ground work potential. Through the long-term plan, there was noted in there business units, development of business units. One of them was the FEMP business unit that Shane's talked about, but there's also a riparian business unit. And so the handbrake's been on a little bit in the first year with our staff having to be quite involved in the logistics around supply and delivery of some of this stuff. So moving forward, it's a focus for us to continue to develop those things that are going to enable staff to be out there more doing the work that's of highest value to get stuff done on the ground. And that also involves some development of the labour supply to do the work that's going to be required, and that's particularly an issue up north. So for my zone here in the middle part of Hawke's Bay, we've got a target next year of 70 erosion control plans, a focus on those sediment loss priority areas, both the catchments that have the highest losses and the farms that do. We'll aim to initially contact all of those 395 farmers that have been identified as high sediment loss farms, and so that will put them at the top of that engagement funnel that eventually will turn out to be work on those properties. To get there, because we have 85% of the population here, and we have had a high level of unsolicited inquiry, we're going to need to get beyond that inquiry that just comes in all the time and triage who are the most important people to get to, so that we're able to really get to the areas that we need to be. In the future, we're aware that with central government policies that are coming, and with tank and mohaka to come, that there's going to be high demand for us to work on issues that go beyond erosion. And in the tank plan, as I've put in this report, for our team, it's highlighted 27 action areas for us to be working on. Only 3 of those are to do with erosion. What we really need to do when those things land is to come back with a properly designed cross-council implementation approach. Move on to the north.
Thank you, Brendan. Right, at the moment we are looking at a target of about 70 erosion control plans ourselves. One of the challenges for us at the moment is staffing. We effectively have one person at the moment who's able to do an erosion control plan. That will ramp up over the next 3 to 6 months with the Hill Country Erosion Fund recruitment, but also we've got a person now working, well, as part of that, working in the Gisborne office, Gisborne District Council, working exclusively on the Mangapoiki and Hangaroa catchments. So they're 2 catchments, sub-catchments of the Wairoa that are actually in Gisborne District. So that's a healthy bit of work for us. One of the, I suppose, the greatest challenge for us in Northern Hawke's Bay is that we're a greater presence than we've ever been up there, and so the community has really taken on board Hawke's Bay Regional Council's presence and given us a pretty chunky list of issues to work through as well, and pretty hard to avoid those at times. So we are challenged a little bit by both things. There still is a genuine concern, as you will have well heard on the radio, around the threat of afforestation to the Wairoa community itself, and that continues to have, or challenge us, I suppose, in the work that we're doing, differentiating our grant to a wider afforestation scheme. But in spite of that, there is, as mentioned, there is a lot of optimism in the town. There's things happening. People are feeling the sense of that opportunity. And from my perspective, the greater challenge for the next 12 months really is looking at that lower Wairoa River stem and basically doing something, working with the community to come up with an hour restoration plan. It's a pretty critical part of the desire of that community at this point in time. But basically, that's it.
Thanks, Nathan. So in the south, same there in terms of erosion control plans. We're looking at doing 105 of those this year, with 3 catchment advisors that we've currently got out doing those. We'll be moving on in the coming year from the transition from dealing with a backlog of inquiries and people that have been on hold while this program's been put in place, to try and move away from those and targeting specifically like the other 2 areas where these main areas of erosion are. So particular focus on the worst areas. The Tuki plan policy implementation is starting to move ahead, and we're, as discussed earlier, about Liz's team together working through what that needs to look like. So we'll have, the catchment team will definitely have an involvement within that. It's just to determine exactly what our roles will be. We'll also be supporting central government initiatives like the 1 billion trees and hill country erosion, where that's appropriate, in terms of what options are available to landowners on the ground, and making the connections to the key people that need to be involved. Delivering on any key projects that are underway, so that includes the Central Hawke's Bay District water security discussions, Lake Whātuma, Aramoana around the Marine Reserve at Te Angiangi, and the Parangahau estuary work that Paul Train's currently been doing around Anna's marine budget and works in there around eelgrass and fencing and riparian planting. And overall, we're trying to build a presence in the southern Hawke's Bay area as well, and that's around better collaboration with iwi partners, stakeholders and rural professionals to ensure that the key messages that we've got with to try and get out through those channels is the same, and we're all singing off the same song sheet, and to make more effective use of everybody's time.
Can I just add, I forgot to bring to the committee's attention, the deed for the Whakakī Freshwater Improvement Fund was signed as of this morning, so we now have a $3 million project for the next 5 years to restore the mauri of Lake Whakakī. So.
Well done, Nathan.
So I labored through this report, and I have to say, last night I was thinking I was really bothered that you guys had to spend so much time writing so much when what I felt I needed as a governor to know has been presented in 3 slides here. And I mean, this is just, I don't frankly care who's on maternity leave. That's slowed us down. I mean, what I had to dig out myself was a simple statement of how many of these plans you're projecting to do next year, which is 260 by the count in the document, which is a little different than the numbers you presented, based on 70 approved, and here you said 64 a little earlier, close enough for government work. So we're going to go from 70 to 260. And all I really care about is how realistic is that number. And granting all the startup effort, all the bureaucratic issues and so forth, is 260 a realistic number at the end of the day for next year? That's what I want to know. Is 260, you're going to want 105. You know?
And that's an interesting question, and I guess the key thing that will influence that in the southern area is around the Tuki plan implementation and what that turns out looking like and what the catchment team's involvement in that will be. So, for example, you've got 33 sub-catchments in that area or in that zone. Depending on how many catchment groups there may come out of some of that implementation work, each of those will take up staff time. And it's not obvious at this stage how many there will be or what will need to be involved in that. So we're focusing on doing that, but there will be other things that will come in and intercept some of that work.
And I guess I also couldn't find where the 260 would get us. I mean, in terms of amount of land covered. Sorry, I was not very happy with the report.
To Councillor, it's good to get the feedback, and I guess the thing about reporting like this is that this is the first time we've done this. And rather than be criticised for not giving you enough, we're giving you perhaps more than you actually want. The other point I would suggest is that we've invested significantly in tools and recording systems that mean reporting these sorts of facts and figures is going to get much, much easier in time. So at any point in time, we can probably give you, in the future, we'll be able to give you quarterly reports on where are we at, what have we got in the pipeline, how much land have we got under activity. Being able to give you a say, look, out of 260 erosion control plans, you know, it's going to give you X amount of hectare. It's kind of difficult because all of the properties are different sizes, different things that will influence what sort of area, what might be under management as a result of that. But take on board the point that if you just want stark facts and figures on a table, we can certainly provide you that.
I didn't say that. I do want to know what problems you're facing and how you're going to overcome those problems. That's what I want to know about. And this is not the way to deliver that information, as far as I'm concerned. But I'm only one councillor.
So the narrative was intended to bring out some of the issues that we've faced, and the presentation's given you a bit of a taste of that. So built into the narrative are the issues.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chair. My question is, okay, we've got through that first year, we've settled up, you guys are out there, you know, you've obviously worked it out to about 35 catchment plan target ECPs per advisor, which is, you know, take it, the 3 of you agree that that's a reasonable figure, so that must be a reasonable figure. My question, though, is coming in from behind that is what work are we doing around, because one of your ones was setting up nurseries and getting that done, because we've got to have to start putting seeds in to get the plants in, so that we've got the plants for, instead of doing 50,000 next year, we might be doing, I don't know how many it is. And the other one is around pest control, especially around up north with the goats and stuff, because that's a key driver for the success of any planting programs.
So the procurement, I don't know if Mark Heaney's still here. He is? Oh, very good. So the procurement side is going to be managed by Mr. Heaney and his team. So part of the development of the kind of, we call it the funnel, understanding what our future needs are is, well, it's important that we're doing that so we can be projecting that to Mark and his team so that they can be out there understanding, well, what are the contracts they're going to need to set up, how many plants, what sort of areas, so that we can build that funnel, build the pipeline. So I don't know whether Mark wants to add to his work and where he's at with his procurement process, but that's certainly something we've got pretty actively underway.
Just a brief comment on that, Mr. Chairman, if I may. We've been successful in appointing an erosion control scheme procurement and contracts manager who's going to be starting at the end of July. And it will be their role to develop that line of sight that Councillor Bailey is keen on getting for the nurseries, etc. And as soon as they know what's coming in year 2 and year 3, the happier they are, and we have a greater degree of certainty in being able to provide as well. The other side of that coin is, as was mentioned earlier, the ability to have the gangs on the ground to do it. This person will be managing that as well.
Thank you, Matt. And then any comment on pest management?
So pest management isn't something that we've touched on at this point, but it's something that we're going to be moving into in the outer years. But it's certainly very much part of the program that as we get these things up and running, we get retirement, establishment of new plants, we'll have pest management alongside of it.
Okay, as long as it's in there, yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly part of the mix. There's no formality around it at the moment.
Yep.
Were you looking at question?
Just congratulations, Nathan and the wider team for the Whakakī result. Just unofficially, that the fund that I work for, I'm mindful that I'm on TV, we're hoping to be having a training scheme start next year, and you're the sort of groups across the board, the whole of Hawke's Bay, that we would be needing to link in with right across the ecological and environment sphere.
Peter? Can you go back to the SEDNet map that shows the 3 million erosion prone? Yeah. So when I look at that map, it looks like, I don't know, 75% of the erosion prone land is in Wairoa. So the fact that we've got 3 teams right through, does that mean that that actually is not an accurate characterisation of the erosion prone lands?
No,
Like it might be 90%.
it's a fair representation. 30% of the highly erodible land is in northern Hawke's Bay.
30%.
Of highly erodible. So
That looks like 90% to me.
So figures are on the bottom of the
So
map there.
30% of the district is highly erodible.
Oh, 30% of the district.
yeah, but you're right. The greater proportion is in the Wairoa district.
All right, so we're using that as a method of a starting point, if you like, for where do we target. So have we got our distribution of effort correct then, given that there is such a huge problem in the Northern District?
Yes.
So and look, really good question, and I guess that's what we'll be sort of looking at in the future, is that I'm thinking there's going to be quite a disproportionate amount of work and spend. At the moment, there's demand across all of the zones reasonably equally at the moment, so we're meeting that demand. As we get more tactical and more strategic about this, as we get more into the program, I'm envisaging that we're going to have more staff based in Wairoa than anywhere else and more money going into those areas. But at the moment, we've spread it evenly, and those people are fully committed and busy. But as we see the need, as we bring in more resource, we'll be thinking, well, where do we push that? One of the challenges we've got, of course, is recruiting into Wairoa is harder than recruiting into Napier. So, there's some reality about us being able to
We've been sitting here hearing how Wairoa's on a roll.
I'd like to hear it myself. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that there'll be a review of the allocation
Absolutely.
of resource.
Absolutely. And hopefully, hopefully demand drives that as much as anything, but if we're successful in Wairau, we make the program more obvious and more available, we'll get much greater uptake. Because the other thing about it is that, obviously, Brendan alluded to it, if somebody's knocking on our door from Hiratonga Plain, well, they're probably going to get sorry, we can't help you in this. So there's going to be a triaging of people away from those other areas, which means that we can push the resource further up.
And the relative growth in the teams pre-LTP to now has been much greater in Wairoa, because we already had quite a lot of activity in the Tukituki catchment going on and in the central zone. So the office size there has grown the most, and then with the Hill Country Erosion Fund, the majority of that funding is being applied there as well. So we are, but I'd also make the point that erosion control is not the sole job of these teams as their slides showed. So we do still need to be working on a whole range of issues in the southern part of the region as well.
Councillor Wilson.
When are we going to get a better model than SEDNet? I mean, quite simply, that doesn't measure what actually enters the waterway after each rain event. It's a model based on slope aspect, all that stuff, but actually after every event, not every piece of soil makes it to the water, right? In fact, the percentage would be quite low, very low. If that was accurate, after 3 years of storms, there'd be no bloody dirt left, for Christ's sake. So when are we going to get a better model than Sydney?
Good question, and actually it's built into the Hill Country Erosion Fund bid. So Dr. Barry Lynch fortuitously put forward a proposal to have a range of automated samplers, is it called ISCOs, available, and a full-time FTE to run those. So the intent being that the ISCOs will be deployed throughout catchments very soon, once we've got the contract signed up with the HCF, somebody employed to run them. That information will then be used to further calibrate the SEDNet model. Absolutely, it's a model just as the Taniwha groundwater model is a model, the Hiratonga Plains aquifer model is a model. We have to rely on models like this to target our areas of interest and go to the places where we think it's going to make a difference, and we're absolutely wanting to improve those. Not only are we going to do this targeted work in using the ISCOs, but there is a program of monitoring generally that will start to help us refine and improve our knowledge so we can go and target the areas that are going to make a difference. Ultimately, where the actual decisions made, though, is look, those are just polygons on a map. Where the decisions are actually made and why I've pushed so strongly to have teams of these people in these areas is by standing on the farm with the landowner, looking at where the issues really are and making informed calls about what to do on the right places. So a model won't give us that.
I get that, but when we hear of hundreds of thousands of tonnes going out to sea each year, it's a load of bullshit.
It's actually kind of helpful because it's reasonably accurate in many instances. And look, this is our reality. New Zealand has some of the most erodible country in the world.
I get that.
Gisborne in particular. And it's actually really helpful to be able to quantify this stuff, and we're asking for help from others, the central government, to say, look, actually, this is the scale of our problem. And if we compare Hawke's Bay nationally, we're right up there. We're in the top 5 in terms of risk, land at risk. So, yep, I get that it's a model, and I understand that, we're not absolutely saying this is absolutely granularly correct. Hence, that experienced men and women on the ground with the landowner making decisions on the ground. And if I think about that model also and how it's working in Horizons and the SLUI program, where they've taken a very similar approach, recent independent analysis done by Emmy Fee and Dr. Tom Snelder have shown that there's a weak but nonetheless statistically significant relationship or association between water quality improvements and E. coli, turbidity, suspended solids, and deposited sediment and catchments under SLUI farm plan management. So the theory is coming out in practice in places where the stuff's coming to ground. Yeah.
That doesn't.
Someone care to move?
Happy to do so, Chair.
Chair, just before you do, can I just make one final point that has been my learning through the last 9 months in this, and I think it's just something we all have to reflect on, and that is borne out by 35 erosion control plans per staff member per annum. And the reality that we're discovering is that from an initial discussion through to a finalised plan, there might be 7 or 8 engagements with the landowner. It is a long, drawn-out process that requires a lot of discussion. And then at the end of all of that, once you've got a plan, I was also surprised, and I shouldn't be, but I was surprised to discover that many landowners will want to do just little bites each year within their cash flow. So the number of people that write a cheque for $100,000 to fence off, large parts of their property and do a big planting is pretty limited. Most will just chip away at it. So in terms of the hectareage that we will achieve levels of protection for, the numbers of trees we get in the ground, the numbers of kilometres of fences we get achieved, relative to the funding we have to put into staffing to drive this, is pretty hard going, to be honest. So we're going to need to continue to build these teams and have a lot of people on the ground to get the environmental outcomes we're looking for, in the absence of regulation. And some of the regulation coming down the line from central government might accelerate quite a lot of this and force landowners to dig a lot deeper in their pockets than they are presently.
And to point 48 in this report, notes that erosion is the current focus and will be the reason the staff go out to the site for these multiple 7 or 8 visits. However, landowner engagements could focus on identifying opportunities to maximize water quality improvement across the range of sustainable land management activities, the sort of stealth extension service concept. Taking aboard everything you just said about getting a erosion control plan, the fact of the matter is, I would think that the optimum leveraging of all that time investment is to address a wider range of issues, is it not? And so if we could also in any way kind of quantify how are we advancing other objectives at the same time that we're doing this one, that would be nice to see.
Yes. So we're expecting mandatory farm plans to be required for all farms in the country, and that regulation to emerge within the next 12 months. So that's where we're going, and that will look holistically, and actually central government's now having a bigger conversation about environment being merely a module within a much larger farm plan that covers health and safety, hazardous substances, labour, all that sort of thing. So you'll have basically a Bible document on the farm that will have all your regulatory requirements, and you have auditing around that. It's very much the European model, and I think frankly, whether people like it or not, that's just the inevitable direction of travel for farming in New Zealand.
And the customer relation system we're setting up will give us good intel in terms of how much contact time we've had on those topics.
Councillor Graham, do you have your hand up?
I just want to make a comment about the Northern Wairoa. So Paul and I went to Wairoa on Monday, and all that land up there, we saw farms that were just fenced and walked away, and within 20 years the bush was back. And within 30 years, we saw a property, it was completely back. So Wairoa was really lucky in a way that you couldn't do that in Heratonga or in the south, because it rains and you've got a whole lot of seeds and you've got birds and all stuff we haven't got. So I don't know, it's not too expensive to do that if we can encourage farmers to put off blocks of their farms and just fence them, and pest control, of course.
Will someone please move the recommendation? Are you moving it?
Yeah, I'll Peter.
Councillor Bevan, second. Would you care to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you to Ian and his team for setting up this program. It seems to have, these things take a while to germinate and get going, but it seems you've now got a much better idea of where you're headed, and it seems to be going to plan. There are some challenges that have come out of that we weren't aware of initially, but that I'm willing to face those things. And I'd just like to say, guys, that in talking to your staff, under the people that are actually out in the field, they all seem to continue to be excited about the challenge and really enjoying what they're doing. So that reflects, I think, on you guys, the way that you manage your people. So I'd just like to congratulate you for that.
Yeah, I think the work that you guys are doing is critical and fundamental to the functioning of the responsibilities of this council. So I take my hat off to you guys as well and keep it up.
Any other comments? So despite being grumpy about the report, I want to second that emotion. I think this is a hugely important investment, and I think we have the right team doing it, and good on you. But keep it brief, please. I'll move the recommendation, which is simply to accept the report on page 107. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. So can I take advantage of Nathan being here to give you 5 minutes on item number 14, landscape scale ecological restoration.
Thank you, Chair.
Floor is yours. Thank you, guys.
Yes, just very quickly, I'll take the report as being read, but basically what the wider landscape view is about is looking beyond discrete projects and where there's crossovers and synergies and other benefits that could be realised, but taking the job a little bit more strategically going forward. What that means is, the identification and prioritisation and protection of key sites of significant assets, ecological assets, cultural assets, those sorts of things. So where we strategically locate our projects, how we link projects together, what habitat we're protecting and how we're protecting it. The key part of this, I think, is really the engagement of the wider community in that process. And as I alluded to in the report, being a Mahesian myself, it's a pretty proud and very active community.
Or a Mahejan?
Either way. So it's very much a people process, and people are fundamental to getting this bit of work going forward. As the report alludes to, there is a significant amount going on up there at the moment. There's been whole catchments fenced off in the last 9 months and will be planted in the coming winter. So 130 hectares of one secondary catchment to the Whangawahi. The Whangawahi work's ongoing. The Whakatipu Mahia and the predator-free work's ongoing up there. There are a lot of other opportunities that could be extended into through this momentum that would add significant value to what's going on up there. So where to with this process, or where to with this, the opportunity exists in extending the networks of people that we're working with. So we do limit ourselves a little bit with who we're working with. I think there is greater opportunities for some of the resident population, the holiday makers, that sort of thing, to be involved in this. They have a strong desire to be involved in this. The Whangawahi Catchment Management Group goes from strength to strength, and I think there's an opportunity to leverage off that into particularly the isthmus area of Mahanga, Oraka, Mahi Beach. The community has huge aspirations for being in charge of their own governance, and I think that's a key role for us to help support them in that. There are obviously opportunities through the work that's going on to build greater skills and training and associated work through nurseries and planting trees and things like that. So looking at how we might leverage the work that we're doing with the community to provide other benefits. So the next steps for us are very much around engagement and consultation. So this is not a project that we're prescribing in any shape or form. This is a project that has largely emerged from the community, and it's our role to help facilitate that come to light. There is probably the next step from here is to build some external support into that and to start identifying those aspirations and those assets and build a plan around them.
So it seemed to me there was a lot of common sense in here. Is there anything you need from us?
Once we've gone through that hui process, I'd love to come back with a proposal and potentially seek some further support around various means and ways of getting the job done.
And there may well be more resource required in the LTP.
A regional office based at Mahi Beach would be very handy too.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Graham, Councillor
Thanks for that report. It's really good. I mean, and the whole of the Mahia thing is really exciting. So what's your best bet on a chance of us getting that to be a pest-free area? Like a fence.
Colleague.
Campbell's over the back, he might want to jump into that.
Oh, he wants to stay in the back, I guess. You were half asleep, weren't you? So we've done a lot of talk about Mahia, and it's really exciting. It's got that it's an isthmus with a...
Campbell, do you want to come up
with
an
opportunity? What chance do we have of making that pest-free? Fence.
Pest-free.
So I think there's a couple of comments on that. The first is around the opportunity for being pest-free. And technically, there is no reason why we can't have Mahia free of possums and mustelids within the next 3 or 4 years. Rats is a different context entirely, and eradication of rats on the peninsula would be a significant challenge, but again, it's a peninsula and it's possible. The challenge then becomes in actually keeping them from coming back in.
That's why you need a fence, that's what I'm saying.
Well, no, so the thing with the fences, actually, it might be that a fence is appropriate, but actually there's other technologies available now which are possibly as effective, virtual barriers, which are being worked on by the likes of the Zero Invasive Predators team. So a fence is one opportunity in the context of things, but it's not the only tool available now. Yep.
Questions?
Should talk. Councillor Wilson.
Oh, just 2 quick questions regarding Mokatahi Hill. Isn't that QE2 though? I mean, how much is available land? And is the question here, it's 10.5, more about us contributing financially to that, or are you saying that there is a work program that we could do there?
QE2 are looking to hand Mokatahi back if they can.
Right, okay, thank you. That's all I need to hear. And the fecal indicator bacteria breaches, which probably goes to Mr. Maxwell, which is number 11.1, just what were they taken recently, as in the last 6 weeks or something, like a winter reading, or are they end of summer, i.e. people would have wanted to swim there?
But they were all through the swim through summer, Hawke's Bay monitoring.
These are our problem spots.
Yeah, yep. Amazing.
So in contrast that with Whangawehi, that's got improving trends in fecal indicator bacteria because of the works that have been done in there.
Really? Thank you. That's good to know.
Did I review? Did you read? Mr. Moe.
Miller. What did you say?
Mohi.
Oh, sorry.
That's you.
Yeah, it just seems a bit ironic for the station manager at the Tawapata station at the end of the peninsula that hasn't seen a opossum for 7 years, but you just stand on the hill there and you see hundreds of goats. Is there any comment on that? They're not part of the pest-free.
So
are they pets?
They're not part of the current pest-free Mahia suite of pests, and as whether they're pets or pests might depend on who you ask up there, as you probably well know from your Ngāwhene Rahui connections. But look, I think that realistically, if we're successful in eradicating possums, if we're successful in getting rid of mustelids, there have been in the past conversations at Hui with the community where they've talked about the idea of getting rid of goats off the peninsula. But I think it's also a case of one thing at a time, get one success and then move on to the next one.
With those other pests been gone, the goats get fairly lonely.
The goat question's a challenging one because a number of the farmers up there, way back in 20, 30 years ago, goats were the only thing that kept them financially viable, and they still remember that keenly. And so to see the goats taken off their property, they're not overly enthused about that proposition at the moment. So there's not widespread support for the eradication of goats on the peninsula.
Yeah, well, I have a comment on that because I don't care what their enthusiasm is. We will not meet our objectives unless we get rid of goats. And if a farmer wants to farm goats, I'm really happy for him to do it, but he keeps them on his property. And we need to send that message out loud and clear.
But we also need to acknowledge that farmers need to be resilient in their systems, and that's part of that resilience. And so by just sort of going over the top of that without considering it, that we're not enabling a farmer to build resilience into a system. I agree with you. I think the goats should be managed, and I think they're a resource that we are underutilising, but it's also, they're a key component to people surviving on the land.
They need shooting, that every one of them.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I'm representing what I'm hearing.
Councillor Rowan, he was moving the recommendation. Councillor Wilson seconding it. Further discussion?
It's just a quick comment, Chair. I see the Prime Minister made good use of Mokatahi Hill, and just a word of advice to Mr Mohi, if he can coax Linda up there, you never know what she might say, Mike. So.
I prefer to go by myself.
It's recorded.
Any other comments?
She's watching this. You forgot you're on TV.
It's recorded for all time.
I'm not hearing any other comments. I'll put the motion on page, whatever it is.
Yep, we'll receive the report.
81, receive the report. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now, it is 5 minutes to 3. We have 2 public excluded items, and we have, if you're watching this agenda carefully, 3 items, 11, 12, 13, 16, 17, that we have not addressed. We could take those, which is what's being proposed by the chair, as read, unless somebody saw something in one or another of those that they feel needs discussion.
Sure, thank you, Chair. The only thing...
Wait a minute, let me finish. Or we can just keep on going. So what's the pleasure of the group?
I've just got one question on one of the papers, that's all.
Which one?
Number 13, Waitangi Horseshoe Wetland Update.
Yep.
I just didn't see any mention in there, Chris. I know I spoke to you a week or so ago about finding a name for the new lake, especially a local name that would suit Tangata Whenua. I think that would be something we could work on.
Yep. So there is a process and there is a provisional name, but because it hasn't been agreed by all parties at this point, we didn't include it in the paper. It's also public paper.
Have they started filling it up?
2 questions, eh?
July. So
can you let us know when you do that?
3 questions.
Yeah, no, we want to go along there with wave the banner and stuff.
We'll let you know.
Great. Yep.
Okay. Any questions on any of the other items? No.
Councillor, I can't make a comment on one.
No. You may. Which is the one? Which one?
Just to save Gavin and I coming down for the 4th time today. Just in terms of the update on central government policy announcements. Look, there's a lot in there, and I really item 11. There's an enormous amount in there, and there's an enormous amount going on, and we mentioned the zero carbon bill. I just think it's just important to point to the essential freshwater reform that's going on. We're lucky in this organisation that not only have the CE's contribution to that program, but Ian Maxwell as convener of the RMG, they're all heavily engaged in that process, and we have one of our own staff members down there on secondment on our pay. It is going to represent potentially quite a significant change to the cadence and requirements of our freshwater plan change process, and so we've got a simultaneous a sense of urgency to get on with it, and obviously get Tank and outstanding water bodies notified and get Mohaka underway. But we also have a great deal of uncertainty around what the new regulation is going to be and what is going to be the requirements for those processes. So it feels like a very schizophrenic time for us in that respect. But it's just a keep a watching brief on this essential freshwater reform. I'm not sure. I think it probably first briefs out in July. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, it's got to get through Cabinet first, and that's the big question about, obviously, the 3 parties of government and the extent to which they're going to agree on what is the most extraordinarily ambitious reform package for freshwater that certainly I think any of us imagined we'd see. To give you a sense of that, the national policy statement's been completely rewritten. Oh, wow. So, everything you know about the way we're doing freshwater reform is on the table for turbocharging and much faster, much more regulation. So buckle in.
Except for outstanding water bodies. The one thing that didn't touch.
Too hard.
So I pressed for this particular report to be drafted, and it is chock-a-block full of important information. I mean, it's a very thorough piece of work, and it just goes through, if you haven't really looked at this carefully, the request put to the staff was what's happening in Wellington that is going to have in a new government with a bunch of money that is prepared to spend and a lot of policy aspirations and so forth that will confront us basically as regional council in the next year and a half or so. And when you read this, it's just page after page of stuff that's going to conceivably have a major impact on how we conduct our business here. So it's a shame we don't have a little more time to spend on it. One way I think the report could be improved would be to have a little more ranking of maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 buckets in terms of what's really, like the freshwater thing, what's, maybe a bit more tangential or what have you, because there's so much going on here that we need to be mindful of. It's clear the staff is, but I think we as councillors need to be aware of some of this too.
Mr Chair, I wonder whether we could actually take that paper forward to council on 26. Is there enough time and room to even just touch again on it? Is there scope, James?
Look, probably. The 26th obviously is the IPO decision-making day, so...
are we selling the port?
So it depends on how much of the day that takes up, and we've got the chief executive of Pāmu Landcorp coming presenting to the council as well, so that's an additional impost on the day. So
I agree with Councillor Chairman. It's an important paper for us to keep our eye on the ball at that level.
So maybe we need to revisit it at the next meeting or something.
We could bring it to the Regional Planning Committee, but that's chopper as well.
Yeah. Well, it would probably be going to the Regional Planning Committee almost as part of the statutory advocacy update. So maybe that's the 3rd of July, RPC.
I'd like to see it again.
Yeah, that's a good place.
Councillor.
So I think we have to receive reports on items 11,
12, 13,
16, 17. So I'd like to move those en bloc.
Okay.
Second.
Second from Councillor Curtin. Further discussion of any of that?
Yeah, I like to speak on all of this.
All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay, we've accepted those. It leaves us with minor items not on the agenda. I believe there were 3 of those.
Yep.
Managed aquifer recharge is one of them.
Yeah, of course, we had the announcement of the funding for the managed aquifer recharge down in Ruataniwha. I know that we had approved to go ahead with the PGF application and all that sort of stuff, but during that process I asked a number of times for some more details around what it actually means, the consequences of doing the managed aquifer recharge. And then I find in the media that it's going into a pre-feasibility stage, and nothing's come back to us in terms of, is this a viable project? We've got a SkyTeam survey which is going to be giving us much more information about the aquifer, so how can we do a pre-feasibility without actually having that information back? We've got no idea about how it fits into strategic opportunities. So your
request is a minor item?
My request is for a report to come back to this committee or to the council at some stage before we proceed any further with the project, because we haven't had an opportunity as governors to make a decision on whether it's actually whether it actually works or not, or what the consequences of such a thing is. And to my mind, that's where Ruataniwha fell down right at the very beginning, and I don't want to see that happen again for this.
If I could just make a comment. So Councillor Bailey, I'm happy and apologise for not responding to your email. It's time constraints, and the reassurances that you're seeking will be forthcoming, and so I've got some work to do and to figure out how that statement made it into the media, but it's not correct.
Yep.
And you are correct in the fact that the program, as was agreed, around that freshwater security policy comes back to this table.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But we can talk more about it.
I should probably just add that the report that you're aware of, which is the very, very first report, which is there anything to see here, is actually in draft form. I thought it was finalised, but it's in draft form and sitting with our science team at the moment for a response. So it hasn't even got to the point of finalising the very first report, establishing whether there is even the case for going to pre-feasibility, if you like. So we're very early in this stage.
Okay, so as long as it's going to come back around this table at some stage, that's fine. Yep, thank you for that.
Yep. Second item is reforestation in Wairau.
I won't revisit the reforestation too much, just suffice to say that Paul and I spent the day in Wairau just touring. We went up specifically to see the Snelling farm and the amazing work that Jill had been doing. We also visited a couple of others, and the one next door was quite a stunning property that had, over 30 years, had just about gone totally back to natives. And he had some paddocks which he just started to go back, and they were going back as well, quite amazing. But the amazing thing about his property was he was spending 4 hours a day on pest management, and what he was catching, 7 and 8 different types of rats, ferrets, occasional cat, but every day he caught 7 or 8 things on his small farm. Well, it was incredible the dedication that he was showing, not only to revegetation of his farm, but to pest control as well. So it was a very rewarding day for both of us.
Cool. All right. And the last item was mine, future farming. At 5:30 today, we're having the next meeting of the Future Farming Group. They'll be looking at a list of 12 candidates that were winnowed down from 30-some the other day for people to be on the permanent trust that would manage this initiative going forward. So presumably at the end of this evening, we'll have feedback from the broader working group on those recommendations, and then set in motion an interviewing process to bring that number down further and actually select, I believe our target is going to be 8.
And will you bring that to council, will you, those names?
The eventual appointees?
Yeah.
Bring it back in what respect? To be approved, or?
I just have a position that I know that it's not held unanimously, that we need to have a councillor on that trust. I want to make sure that happens from...
Well, that is an issue that would have to come back, but I'm not sure... I'm not sure that we...
So I can confirm that the draft trust deed, which I was reviewing earlier this morning, does have provision for a councillor appointed trustee to be appointed through a council process.
But I think
through a council process, good.
Well, so a council process for the appointment of the council appointed trustee.
Okay, that's good.
I thought you were asking beyond that whether the council was approving the others. The answer to that is no.
Are we?
No.
Why not?
We don't approve the members of the Hawke's Bay Tourism Board.
Why not?
No, I'm happy with that as well, Tom.
Let's not go there.
Jesus, I'm dying for a cup of tea.
Minor business item. All right, so we have completed the public agenda, and we now need to either take a break and then come back and move into public exclusion.
Process question, Chair. The item on the Tutera, etc. harvest, why has that come here and not the tenders committee?
Good point.
Part of the reason is where part of the proposal is not to actually go to tender.
Yeah, but even so, it still goes through the tenders committee.
Where's the decision to or not to? It's still a decision, isn't it, Peter?
It's a contract decision.
But look, it can go there.
I know why we're dealing with it. I'm happy to do it.
Well, it's here now. It's here now. So we're heading 5?
So let's take 5.